The Gilgal Conference was done in Osaka, Japan through the use of Zoom, since COVID-19 prevented me from attending personally. The conference focus was on Israel's final preparation to claim the Promised Land and lessons we can utilize today. The conference was a 2-day Saturday and Sunday event with 2 sessions presented on Saturday and a final session on Sunday. Only the 3 conference sessions are included here, but you're free to design your own worship program and music for your own conference. In this presentation, only the English translation is used, but it is also being prepared in Japanese and Chinese. Other languages can also be prepared by your contacting me at vball_one@hotmail.com. Joshua 3:1. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and they removed from Shittim, and came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. And it came to pass after 3 days that the officers went through the midst of the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, When you see the ark of the covenant of Jehovah your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place, and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near unto it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way heretofore. Life is full of struggles and conflicts. We often wonder why God allows sin to continue running rampant when we are enduring so much pain and suffering. Struggles and conflicts are like the thorns on a rose. Thorns can be painful and are often the first thing we think of at the mention of a rose. But if we focus on the thorns, we will miss the unsurpassed beauty of the rose. Like the rose, blessings of life often come disguised as struggles and conflicts. But they also contain great blessings. The thorns serve as a protector to the rose as well as to enhance its value. In addressing the thorns, we learn how to address the pain and the difficulty in life. Our focus is not to be on the problems, but on the blessings that are hidden there. In reality, these struggles and conflicts are an opportunity to move beyond the circumstances and be transformed into Christ's image. This imagery is portrayed clearly in the crown of thorns Jesus wore at his crucifixion. It is always the cross first, then the crown. This is an eternal change that you will never lose. It seems that the obstacles before us are impossible to overcome, and our trials come at such an inopportune time. In our effort to do God's will, we find our way forward demands far more than the sum of our resources and our skills, our time, our understanding. But that is precisely the point. God's will is impossible to accomplish without faith in Him. This is because if we could succeed without Him, then we would get the glory and the world would never know Him or His power. Such is the case with the children of Israel. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, the time had come for them to claim the promised land. It would not come easily, nor would it be by the strength of the people. It would come only through the wisdom and the power of the Almighty God. Multiple obstacles still lay ahead that can only be overcome through faith in God. The first major obstacle in claiming the promised land was the 7 nations occupying the land. It was theirs, but it was occupied by others. The Lord had promised the land to Abraham and his seed, Genesis 15:18. And the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. The problem was that there were 7 occupying nations in the land, and each one was stronger and mightier than Israel. They were all descendants of Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons, and are named in Deuteronomy 7:1. When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Pezerites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. This certainly presents a major conflict and barrier to Israel's occupation to the land. The second major barrier to occupying the land was ignorance about the enemy. To gain information, Joshua sent 2 spies into Jericho who lodged at Rahab's home. Joshua 2:1. And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, Go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and they came into an harlot's house named Rahab, and they lodged there. The king of Jericho found out about the 2 spies, and they knew that the spies had gone to Rahab's home. However, Rahab reported that they had already left and sent the soldiers in the wrong direction. Joshua 2:3. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come unto thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out the country. And verses 4 and 5. There came men unto me, but I wist not who they were. It came to pass about the time of shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where they went, I don't know. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. She had hidden them under the stalks of flax that was laid out on the roof. Joshua 2:6. Later, as she talked with the 2 spies, she reveals some critical information. Joshua 2:9. And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. And verse 10. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. She then helped them escape by letting them down the wall on a scarlet thread or rope. Before the spies left, she made them promise to spare her and her family. They agreed, providing that they were all at her home when the city was taken. Otherwise, there was no agreement. Joshua 2:18. The third major barrier to their occupation was the people themselves. Joshua was told 4 times that he was to be strong and of good courage. He was also commanded to follow the law of Moses and to study it day and night. The Israelites had observed the conflict between the Jewish leadership grumbling against God and his leader, Moses, for 40 years, as well as the death of all of the men of war that came out of Egypt. Therefore, they were commanded to keep a space between themselves and the Ark of the Covenant of 2,000 cubits. That's just over a half a mile. So that by observation, they would know where to follow. Then there was this note added: "For ye have not passed this way before." There was going to be a new order of fellowship called faith. Then there was to be a time of consecration. Joshua 3:5 reads, "And Joshua said unto his people, Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." The word sanctify literally means to set apart. That is what you do when you sift or classify sand, rock, soil, and so forth. It means to separate something from its environment and usually includes for a specific use. It can also mean to leave behind, such as a runner in the race removes every weight that is unnecessary and leaves it behind. A third meaning is to discontinue its use. An example would be to abandon a car that broke down or to terminate a contract. To discontinue its use since it is no longer valid. Simply stated, it was a time of letting go of the past way and its practices. It's not easy to fight within ourselves, but it is a putting to rest of our own will and putting our faith in God. This was followed by a promise of the Lord, doing wonders among them, particularly the crossing of the Jordan River on dry ground. The crossing of the Jordan River was a miracle that is comparable to the crossing of the Red Sea. The way across was blocked by a large volume of water, and in both cases they crossed on dry ground. The water was stacked upon itself and held back by the power of God. The crossing was the beginning of a new phase of their lives. In the crossing of the Red Sea, the Israelites were delivered from the armies of Egypt and slavery. In the crossing of the Jordan River, Israel was delivered to the Promised Land. This brings us to the fourth major barrier, the Jordan River. Joshua 3:15 says, "And they that bear the ark were come unto Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for Jordan overfloweth all its banks at the time of harvest." The first thing we notice is that the crossing did not happen when the river water was low, but just the opposite. It was when it was at flood stage. At this time of the year, the river was expanded to a width of 1 to 2 miles wide. The second thing we notice is that the waters did not begin to part until the priest carrying the ark stepped into the river water. Only then, when the soles of their feet touched the water, did the waters begin to stack up. Joshua 3:16. That the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon a heap very far from the city of Adam, that is beside Zaratan. And those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even to the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. From this scripture, we know that the crossing was at Jericho, and the distance from Jericho to the town of Adam was about 18 miles. That's how far the water backed up. That would make this body of water comparable to the size of the Sea of Galilee, which is 13 miles by 8 miles. We also know that the lowest place in this body of water was at the crossing, and the shallowest place would have been at the town of Adam. Since the elevation of the Sea of Galilee is 700 feet below sea level and the elevation of the Dead Sea is 1,300 feet below sea level, we know that there is about 600 feet difference in elevation. Also, we know that it is about 72 miles from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. So the distance of 18 miles from water covered 1/4 of the distance, so it would have contained 1/4 of the elevation fall, or about 150 feet plus or minus, by 1 or 2 miles wide. These figures are not exact, but to give you some idea of how much water was being held back by the hand of God. Now, the third thing we notice is that the waters of the Jordan will be cut off, which means that the river was stopped up or blocked by the hand of God. And further, the waters that flowed down began to pile up, as the scripture stated that they began to stand in a heap. Now consider what the Israelites observed. Priests were marching down to a river in flood stage. As their foot first touched the water parted with the water flowing down suddenly stopped and began stacking up. And the water below the priests continued flowing down, and the ground quickly drying up so that they were not even getting wet. Now consider your sensations of marching down to the dried up river and then marching across it while the waters coming down continued to stack up as much as 150 foot high. Now, consider that you are one of the 12 chosen to go back into the riverbed and select a stone from where the priest stood, and you carry it to the campsite at Gilgal, where you and the other 11 place your stone as a memorial to God and this occasion. There was also a second set of 12 stones. The second set of 12 stones was placed by Joshua in the midst of the Jordan, where the priest stood and remained until the crossing was completed. Those 12 stones remained as a testimony of God's unlimited grace that remains until God has completed his work. In Joshua 4:18, and it came to pass, when the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord were come up out of the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up unto the dry land, that the waters of Jordan returned. We now come to the fifth major barrier, the reproach of Egypt. Joshua 5, 1 through 5, and it came to pass, when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel until they were passed over, that their hearts melted, neither was their spirit in them any more, because of the children of Israel. At that time the Lord said unto Joshua, Make thee sharp knives, and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time. And Joshua made him sharp knives, and circumcised all the children of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise. All the people that came out of Egypt that were males, even all the men of war, died in the wilderness by the way, after they came out of Egypt. Now all the people that came out were circumcised, But all the people that were born in the wilderness by the way as they came forth out of Egypt, them they had not circumcised. And on 6 through 9, for the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness, till all the people that were men of war, which came out of Egypt, were consumed, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, unto whom the Lord sware that he would not show them the land, which the Lord sware unto their fathers, that he would give us, a land that flows with milk and honey. And the children whom he raised up in their stead, them Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not circumcised by the way. And it came to pass, when they had done circumcising all the people, that they abode in their place at the camp until they were whole. And the Lord said to Joshua, this day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you. Wherefore, the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. For 430 years Israel had struggled under the burden of slavery in Egypt. They did not see themselves as a nation, and their view of God was he was uninvolved. Then for the past 40 years, they had seen many of their leaders resist God and his servant Moses at every turn. They were pessimistic and unbelieving. Now, a new generation had grown up and watched all of the soldiers that came out of Egypt die off, without even claiming the promised land. Most of the Israelites alive now had been born outside of Egypt, yet they had grown up under the influence of those who remembered the good things of Egypt and longed to go back, even though it would mean continued slavery. In short, they didn't believe God had their best interests at heart. This new generation did have some things going for it, however. They had seen God's miraculous power at work. Their clothes never wore out. They were provided manna and quail on a regular basis. They were led by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire at night. They had the Ark of the Covenant and the commandments of God. They had Moses, the priest, and the promise of God to inherit the promised land. They had seen the destruction of the two giant kings, Sihon and Og, along with their kingdoms. However, before they could claim the promised land, they needed to seal their relationship with God for themselves. The stigma of being a slave had to be removed and the order of faith established for them to see God's blessings realized. God's means and methods is and always has been through faith. So they were commanded to sanctify themselves. Faith was symbolized by circumcision. The word circumcision means to remove, to separate, to discontinue that which is unnecessary. In Abraham, that was symbolized by the cutting away or removal of the foreskin of the genitals. It symbolized a separation from the world and its values and entrusting themselves to God. Here, it was reaffirming of putting their faith in God and equally rejecting the way of their forefathers in being stiff-necked. So circumcision was a sign or a seal of a covenant between God and Abraham. You see that in Genesis 17:10 and 11. This is my covenant that you keep between me and you, your descendants after you. The sons of all you are to be circumcised of the flesh of the foreskin. This is the sign of the covenant between you and me. That's seen again in Romans 4:11. And he received a sign of correctness of faith that had not yet been circumcised, but to be the father of all who believe, though they have not been circumcised, that justice may also be imposed on them also. Abraham was circumcised as a sign of righteousness in his faith in God when God promised the son to Sarah, which was Isaac. In the Jewish community, it became a law, a sign of separation from the Gentiles. It represented separation from the world and dependence on God. Circumcision is also used as a metaphor. The phrase, circumcise the foreskin of your heart, was used in both the Old and New Testament to point to the erroneous and destructive attitudes of the heart which weigh us down and steal our joy. Just as the circumcision of the flesh is a joint effort, so also is the circumcision of the heart a joint work. The cutting away is done by God, but the loosening of our grip is up to us. By eliminating them from our life, we are freed to live the life of faith in the Lord. Supporting scriptures to this are in Deuteronomy 10:16. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart, and be no more stiff-necked. Deuteronomy 30 verse 6. And the Lord thy God will circumcise thine heart, and the heart of thy seed, to love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and thou mayest live. Again in Jeremiah 4:4. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord, and take away the foreskin of your heart, ye men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my fury come forth like fire, and burn that none can quench it, because of the evil of your doings. And in the New Testament, the reference of circumcision in the heart is clearly a changed heart toward God, rather than a legalistic keeping of the letter of the law. Seen in Romans 2:28 and 9. For he is not a Jew which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. This teaching of circumcision is expanded in the New Testament. The very life of faith God had depicted by circumcision became blocked in legalism and brought death instead of life. Legalism can be defined as a list of do's and don'ts and are a form of a merit system. We do not earn salvation nor our blessings. God is not impressed with our accomplishments, and they do not bring His favor. The letter of the law will kill you from the inside out, but the spirit of faith in Him will bring life more abundantly. Now the way is restored by our faith in the Lord without the keeping of the letter of the law. Look in 2 Corinthians 3:6, who also has made us able ministers of the New Testament, not in the letter, but in the Spirit. For the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. Again in Romans 7:6, but now we are delivered from the law, that being dead, wherein we were held, that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in the oldness of letter. 1 Corinthians 7:19 says circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of God. In Galatians 5:6, for Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. Again in Galatians 6:15, for in Christ Jesus neither circumcision availeth anything nor uncircumcision, but a new creature. And again in Philippians 3:3, for we are the circumcision which worship God in the Spirit, and rejoice in Christ Jesus, and have no confidence in the flesh. So let's look at the circumcision made without hands. The Bible teaches that we are complete in Him, as Christ, and that we are circumcised with the circumcision made without hands. That is, not a physical but a spiritual circumcision. It explains further that in this putting off of the body of the sins of the flesh by the works of Christ. Symbolically, it is visualized in the act of baptism. I died to sin, I was buried in a grave of water, and then I was raised up from death and was made alive in Him. All my trespasses were forgiven, and the handwriting of ordinances that was bringing death were removed. Now, I am freed from the power of sin, and so then we come to the question, what was the purpose of allowing the conflict between the flesh and the spirit? So why did God choose faith as His method of operation, which required facing insurmountable obstacles and limitless power? Here are some reasons that I see, and you may even add some to your list. Number one, that you shall know that God is among you. He's not just uninvolved. Number two, that the people of the earth might know God is mighty. Number three, that you might fear the Lord your God forever. Number four, that their hearts would be melted. Number five, that we might be complete in Him. Number six, that we might put off the body of the sins of the flesh. Number seven, that we might be made alive and forgiven. Number eight, that the handwriting of ordinances that is against us would be blotted out. Number nine, that He would make a show of them openly, triumphing over them. So in conclusion, I want you to take special note of this. Even though sin has no grip on me, I must now loosen my grip on sin in order to experience this new life. Jesus said in John 10:10, I am come that you might have life and have it more abundantly.